Hello everybody and welcome to Crushing Comics Live. I'm your host Krisis with a K, and I'm here to talk about the comic week that was for books that came out on the 30th of June, 2021. I'm going to go through all of my pulls, and they are many. I'm going to share my top 10 of 2021. I'm going to look forward to a few things from next week, and who knows what else we might get into here. And as always, if you're watching live, I'm so happy to hear your questions and chat with you live before we get into these brief 60-second or less countdowns on me getting a chance to talk about the books from last week. Before we begin, I always like to give a brief touch tone kind of thing that I've been thinking about in terms of comics for the week. I call it my moment of crisis. And so my moment of crisis this week is about community. You know, I was not somebody who had a comic book shop that was a community for me. I had one that I went to when I was younger, but I wasn't there to talk about the books. The people there didn't necessarily pull the same things as me. And even now, if I had some local comic shop that I went to, nobody would read the same things as me. Maybe they would all read X-Men, but I read some stuff this week that I can't even find anybody else on the internet who is reading. But the whole point of community is for you to give something to it and to get something back from it, right? So you want to be able to talk about the books that you like, and you want to hear them talk about the books that they like and respond. And so I think as we go on to the internet and we find community on things like Twitter and Facebook and Discord and all of these other places, Reddit, I think something that's hard to tell because you're not in physical space and a lot of these aren't real time, is if you're really accepting something back from the community and if it's valuable to you, and then if you're contributing back on their contribution, it's really easy to be in a community that's just willing to listen to you and feel like you've found community. But if you're just in a place that's just listening to you talk, you might just need a YouTube channel. And I think I actually correspond with and interact with all of you a lot. So I've just been thinking about that with some of the news that have come out in the last week, some of the talk about brigading and kind of piling on, and also some of the comics that I read this week about this idea of where's your community? And, you know, a real feeling of a community that lasts is a community where you're giving them something, they're giving you something back, and you're then giving something in return. So that's always my ideal, and I've kind of come and go from a lot of online communities because a lot of times I do feel like I'm just talking and I don't ever want to just be the person who's talking. And then sometimes I also feel like there's nothing I'm really getting back from anybody, even though I'm wanting it back. So those are some thoughts on internet comic communities. I know it's a little bit vague and maybe I'm dancing around talking about some specific things, but I guess my big point is find the thing that you love where the people are willing to hear you even if they're not into the same thing as you. That is a sign of a good community. I'm being blinded by my light over here. Okay, that's a little bit better. We have so many books to talk about this week, although thank goodness not as many as last week. And I did remember to bring water this time, which I'm sure is going to be a great aid to me. But before we get into the books of the week, let me share my screen. And we are going to do my super ultra fast rundown of my top 10 comics of 21 so far. Oh, there we go. So there have been two big changes on the list this week, but hold on, let me start my timer. So I thought the big change was that I was going to slip in a book from number 11 to number 10 because one of the books dropped out of the top 10. You'll hear about me talking about it later. But instead, a new book vaulted in. So I've still got Philadelphia, which I talked about last week, a book that I really, really love. It's also Shadow Man, which we talked about last week. Great one-shot adventures in the voodoo realm, written by Cullen Bunn with beautiful art by John Davis Hunt and Jordi Belair. Really, really striking, really fun, no background needed. Then Iron Man, I moved a little bit back because I have some things leaping over it. I've really enjoyed this world, not only for Cantwell's writing and Cafu's art, but Frank DeMarta's colors. Really, oh, I stopped my countdown. That was no fair to any of us. How long do we think that took? 15 seconds? Let's put it in the mid-30s. But really, the colors unifying it is really something that appeals to me. But this is my new entry. I'm going to talk about it later. It's very close to the end of the Alphabet of Indie series, so you've got to hang around. This book is freaking wild. You Promised Me Darkness. I just read it this morning. I was going to skip it and decided not to, and oh boy am I glad that I did. And then from there, everything's the same. Iron Fist, Heart of the Dragon, Shadow Doctor, another book I highly recommend. We'll cover it in more detail when the last issue is out. Other History of the DC Universe. You can pick up any one issue. They all work. They're all self-contained. And The Dreaming Waking Hours, which has one more to go. The Picture of Everything Else from Vault. And finally, still at number 1, unthreatened by any other comic in the whole land, Batman. Whoever knew that 2021 would be my year of loving Batman. So I want to welcome everybody who's live on the chat. I see some friendly faces that I know from other chats before. Josh, great to see you. Trigonosis, Time. I know, and I messed it up too. And Warudo, Thank you so much for joining, and others who are in the chat who have just yet to chat as well. Now we're going to get into my polls from last week. And if you've never seen me do this before, or if maybe you've forgotten, I read every book out from DC and Marvel that's in continuity, or at least continuity adjacent. Is it a good idea? I can't tell you that. But it's just my habit, and at some point I might drop back to doing it with Marvel Unlimited and DC Universe, only because they make it really easy to do. But until then, I am still reading everything on the week, for good or for bad. Now, I will tell you that this first book is not one that I read. I thought it would be good to start putting in the ones that I don't read, just so that we can have them for reference. And then if any of you are reading them, you can tell me how great they are. So Batman Scooby-Doo Mysteries, if anybody's read that, give me the news. I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. Sometimes these kids' books turn out to be excellent books, sometimes even better than the mainline books. So, thoughts on July pre-orders on DCBS. Maybe we'll do that if we have time. There's so much crammed in here, but I already made my basket on DCBS, and oh boy, that basket is large. But let's get into last week's comics. Luckily, only a few from DC, because it was a last week of the month for DC. And so I think they have their like week 1 through 4 comics. And then so since it was a week 5, they just put out annuals and spectaculars. Kind of weird that you wouldn't just spread the things a little bit more, because the previous week had a ton of comics, but enough preamble. Let's get down to it. This was Catwoman Annual. I don't know, this was tricky. So it picks up from the last issue of Catwoman, but it's also an origin for this wicked priest character, which is cool. And it has art by Holtz, what is his name? Kyle Holtz, who I really, really enjoy. But the thing is that it relies, I thought, really heavily on you knowing or understanding who Azrael is, who I do know and I have read, but it has to do with the religious order that Azrael came from and a little bit about his father. And I feel like I spent so long in the issue trying to figure that out that I couldn't even really fully appreciate the origin tale. I just needed a little bit more information, a caption box, of something. So I finally oriented myself, and it was the origin tale you would think for a character that is this fanatic zealot that this character is. You can totally skip it, because Catwoman's really not in it at all. It's really just a read it if you want the origin, don't if you don't. And I'm kind of neutral. I think if you're loving this Catwoman run, read it, and if not, not. Okay, now we have Green Arrow 100-page super spectacular. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you saw me this weekend say I had spent days not reading my poll because I could not summon up the energy to dive into 100 pages of Green Arrow. But I have to tell you, this does the anniversary special right. If you like Green Arrow at all, you should probably read this. It does this magical thing that I think the best of these specials do, which is makes you picture that this hero is the coolest hero at DC, that they're the best, that every story should be about them, and you don't need any stories about anyone else. Towards the middle, I think it got a little bit laggy in terms of story quality, but the first 3 or 4 just hit the spot so much, and then it ended really strong too. Some really fantastic art. I am just utterly, totally obsessed with this page. It is from the story by Stephanie Phillips with Chris Mooneyham on art and Mike Spicer on colors. I'm telling you, man, Stephanie Phillips, her name comes up every week. She's really rising in my estimation, and she's really entertaining me a lot of comics. So if you like Green Arrow, or even if you like the idea of Green Arrow and you've never like had a chance to dig in all the way, I think that would probably be a really great one to check out. So this Infinite Frontier Secret Files, maybe because I'm not buying physical, I'm a little confused. I thought a lot of these were coming out physically, like 2 issues at a time, but it seems like maybe last week or this week they did 1 Secret Files issues that had all 6 of these shorts. They were really good. I think they're all going to have a little bit to do with the Infinite Frontier ongoing that Josh Williamson just launched, but he co-wrote all of these. And this one, even though I think it's meant for people who know DC history, I don't, as we all know. And it really landed for me. It's this very strange little interrogation with Psycho Pirate that acknowledges his role as sort of existing outside of the timeline of DC as he's trying to find a worthy successor for his mask. It's really, really cool and peculiar, and it's co-written by Dan Waters, who wrote Lucifer, who wrote my number 2 book of the year from Vault, The Picture of Everything Else. And I really, really think this is something neat. And even if you just pick up that 1 single issue rather than the digital shorts, it actually gives me a lot of excitement for the Infinite Frontier book, because this is something that took a thing I didn't know a lot about and made me more excited about, which I think is the goal. I didn't read this or pick it up. It's The Mystery of the Meanest Teacher, a Johnny Constantine graphic novel. The only reason I point it out is because it is by Ryan North and Derek Charm. That is the team from the latter half of Squirrel Girl. Ryan North does not frequently miss, in my experience. His adaptation of Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut last year was amazing. So, like, part of me kind of really wants to read this, but I don't like when they do these YA books that, like, kidifies a hero in a way that's not in line with who they are as an adult hero. So, but also, I don't know if my kid would like, nor do I know if I want them to like John Constantine, so I just thought it was worth mentioning. Okay, Legends of the Dark Knight. There are actually 2 chapters of this. It comes out like later in the week, so I was catching up in a chapter and then the next chapter. This was a pretty cool story. It's Batman and Azrael, as luck would have it, but it's a flashback to some time ago. Batman needs to get some special artifact that Ra's al Ghul has a special interest in to run his Lazarus pits. And it's got some really cool artwork. If you buy them digitally, they're all half pages of art, and then they get put onto full pages when it hits physical. It's written by Brandon Easton, who's been really reliable for me from DC. I don't know who he is. I don't know his background or where he came from. All I know is that every time I see his name on a short story or a comic this year, it's been really, really good. So I guess I probably should spend some time to find out who he is. He did reply to one of my tweets, which is always nice, although it's not why I'm on Twitter. But yeah, he wrote a really serviceable story, and I think if you've been hungering for Azrael stuff, it's fun to read. But the thing with these like out of continuity digital shorts is like, who are they for? Like, okay, you got one issue with an Azrael story that will never get referenced in continuity again. Congratulations. So, you know, kind of mixed feelings on that. I did not read this. I have no idea what RWBY is. I don't know. Is that like a manga thing? It seems like an interesting group of people to be interacting with the Justice League. This is a digital comic that I am not reading. I also did not read Space Jam: A New Legacy, as tempting as that cover makes it. I just have no nostalgia for Space Jam. I never watched the original back in the day, although I was alive and watching movies at that time. But who knows? It might have been great. You don't know. That's my whole thing. It might have been great. You'll see with some of my indie picks this week. I had no interest in some of these indie books. And then I read them and I'm like, holy crap, why is nobody reading them? So to do one of the questions that just got asked in chat, we're going to talk about some stuff that no one else is reading. And then there's Teen Titans Academy yearbook. I have a hard time saying how I feel about this one. So it's an annual, but it's an annual that's made as a yearbook. But I feel like if you have a cast of all of these new characters, which Teen Titans Academy is packed with, you could probably do the yearbook pages in a more helpful way. They're written in a very like in character, like who was voted most fun or whatever. And I just thought that it didn't help me at all. It didn't help me understand the characters. I still don't even have the scope of everybody who's at this school. There's just so many of them. I think if it had done it more like a secret files or more like a handbook entry, I think I would have gotten more out of those pages. However, the stories between those were all pretty good. They're mostly by the writer, the writer of this series. Oh boy, we're all over the place now. Who is Tim Sheridan, with a whole raft of different artists. And the one I really, really liked is about Stitch, who's this person that's made up of stitched together cloth, but they are animated to be a real person, and they inadvertently wind up running for class president. And it was a really, really good story, and it's one of the new made-up characters that I am the most into. I am not into this Truth and Justice Law. I don't really like to talk about it. It's another one of these digital shorts. It's very in the style of Teen Titans Go, which some people would really appreciate. But it has the whole back cast and it doesn't really fit anywhere. So I'm like, again, who is this for? I guess somebody who just wants to spend $1 in a comic book that means nothing. I don't know. And that's it for DC. Wow, that wasn't that many. So while I switch over to my Marvel polls, let's see if y'all had some questions. And if you have questions to get into the chat, I will take a break in between every publisher, maybe even in the middle of indies, because it's just so many. And then I'll take a sip of water and you'll ask questions and then I'll answer them. Budgeting is a real challenge, not only for ongoing comics, but for the stuff that you see around me. Like, I know what my pull list is, and I think for me, the big thing is, like, I know exactly how much money that I have to spend, and if it's going to be out of control, I don't do it. There's plenty of times when I'm not doing a show like this that I will go without a book for like 3 or 4 months and wait for it to hit Marvel Unlimited. Or times, even if you wait a month, a lot of books get cheaper on Comixology. And if you have Comixology Unlimited, which is only $5 or $6 a month, you get 15% off of every book. So that adds up really, really quickly if you are spending enough that 15% of all of your spending in a month is more than $5 or $6. So I have my budget that I stick to, and I'm I'm really fierce with that on collected editions anymore. I do not just buy everything I want to. I budget as far out as previews would go. And then on the other side, I tend to be pretty cautious unless I'm doing stupid crap like this, like reading everything to talk to you about it. But you know, right, I'm paying for the fun of getting to talk to you about these books. I'm so happy so many of you are able to join in live. I'm hoping this time maybe makes a little bit more sense for you. Due to the time changes between New Zealand and the States, I won't always be able to do this time year round, but I can for a few more months. Easton joined the X office. I have not heard this news. That would be really cool if he did, because I'm really digging him. Wow. Also, hello to you from Norway. I don't know if I have any other viewers or watchers from Norway. That is really excited. And Josh, I am going to talk about something I'm reading that no one else is reading, but you have got to get to the Indies to hear about that. Thank you, Philippe, for schooling me on RWBY, because I have no idea. I am capable of Googling these things, but I just put it in the lineup there, and I didn't have time to like Google it. So I'm asking you to Google it for me, effectively. Okay, let's move on to the Marvel books. If you all have more questions, I will get through all of them. I see that one. You know what? We're going to do Jetpack's question, and then we're going to go on. Some people really like those broad art covers. They're like the library plasticky covers that you put on top of dust jackets. But here's the thing. They're really just to protect the dust jacket. They're not doing a whole lot for the book underneath. So if you're somewhere that gets a lot of sunlight, that gets really dusty, if you are afraid of dust jackets getting little dings and things, or if you read your books with the dust jackets on, I think it's a really good idea. I almost exclusively take off dust jackets when I read books, and I really try to keep this room relatively light tight, except for when I'm recording. So I'm not as big of a fan of those. Plus I have so many books. It would be such a project, and I'm not a really handsy craftsy person. So like the idea of like cutting them all to size and folding them over, like if you think back to school when you had to cover your books, that was my hell. I'm so bad at that kind of stuff. So yeah. All right. Questions from that point forward, I will pick up after we are done Marvel, because oh boy, do we have a lot to do. Let me see if I can remember what one of these menus. Loop. There we go. So hopefully it'll help me out a little bit if I'm not paying attention. Okay, Giant Size Amazing Spider-Man the Chameleon Conspiracy. Why? Why is this first? Why is it a giant size issue? Why? Here's the thing. When you do a giant size issue of a book, I want that issue to stand alone, okay by itself, in such a way that I'm like, hey, I know you haven't been reading Spider-Man lately, friend, but if you get this giant size issue, you might really dig it. This is so much not that. It's like kind of a finale, which I know they use giant sizes for sometimes, but I'm not into that. But it's not really a finale because the story is just continuing into more Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man is barely into it. There's this in it at all. He has this panel where he even says, jumping ahead, sorry. He has this panel where he even says, oh, I'm all out of quips. I'm like, no shit, Nick Spencer. You haven't had any quips for Spider-Man in this whole damn run. There is a cool thing about the chameleon here, about Peter Parker's sister, that I'm actually kind of into because I just like Peter Parker's sister, but this was such a waste of page space. It was such an insult to fans to cram in another double-sized issue. Just make it one single issue of the actual Amazing Spider-Man title and stop pulling all these damn shenanigans. I'm so happy this run is almost over. I'm not reading Avengers Mech Strike. I'm sorry. It doesn't seem like it's in continuity. If I find out later that it's in continuity, I will read it on Marvel Unlimited. It's by Jed McKay, so it might be really good. But now I've already used 2 seconds of talking about Beta Ray Bill. Here's the thing about this Beta Ray Bill comic. It is wild because it is Daniel Warren Johnson doing the art and the writing and everything except for the coloring and the lettering. And he's got a wild take on everything. Much like Wonder Woman Dead Earth, it's a little bit too wild for some people who have a very specific conception of Beta Ray Bill. And I think that's been a little bit of a turnoff to them. But if you are not like super glued to Beta Ray Bill and you've just wanted something that's kind of the essence of what Beta Ray Bill is about, and you want it to look wild and have awesome neon colors and crazy technology and tentacles and hell beasts and fire, pick this damn book up. It is just as rock and roll as his Murder Falcon. And I'm sure if I did not love Wonder Woman as much as I do, I probably would have had similar feelings about his Dead Earth. I think it's just really fun. Like, I have so much fun reading it every time. There's so much detail. Mike Spicer's colors are just phenomenal, out of this world. He knows when to do like a big burst, like that pink in the back of a page to catch your eye, and he knows when to dial it down too. I just have nothing but fun on Mike Spicer colored books. This Black Cat annual, Infinite Destinies, here's the thing. It lied. I don't like when marketing lies. This A-story, to my knowledge, didn't really seem like it was about these Infinite Destinies characters. The hook through these annuals has been that they're all kind of tied together by these humans who've been imbued with the Infinity Stones. But this story is much more of a Black Cat and White Fox team up. Now, I really like White Fox. I like almost all of the Pan-Asian heroes that got introduced over the course of Marvel doing those manga tie-ins and then giving Greg Pak that whole universe and Atlantis Attacks. I really like them. White Fox might be my favorite one, but this makes this mistake that books do where it introduces introduces like a whole super team to be the fodder, and then they just don't matter. Like, you're like, okay, I'm remembering the names. Here I am remembering the names. And then none of them really matter. And it could have just been more page space for White Fox and Black Cat, who were really, really entertaining. So it kind of just like didn't really land. It wasn't bad, but it just didn't get all the way there for me. And that's fine. Speaking of things that didn't get all the way there for me, Black Knight, Curse of the Ebony Blade. I think Spurrier started this so strong, but I found this issue a little bit incoherent, and I'm having trouble deciding if I would recommend it to you. It just was all over the place. It had a lot of flashbacks. The art was just hard to look at. I think the colors, this is a great page as an example, there needs to be more contrast. Everything on this page is like in the same level of saturation, in the same kind of reds and oranges zone. I literally cannot see anything on this page. I'm not joking. I look at it and it's just a blur to me. So I think his writing was like that too. This is really starting to feel kind of like a discount Once and Future, and that you need to know a lot of Arthurian myth to really appreciate it. I do think Spurrier is giving you more to work with in this than Gillen is in Once and Future. In Once and Future, you just have to know the myth cold. Here, Spurrier's kind of feeding it to you, but it feels like it's less and less about Black Knight. And because his take on Black Knight and the one-shot for King in Black in the first issue was so iconic, I'm kind of like, give me more Black Knight. Like, that's the thing I showed up for. Okay, speaking of, now we have Black Widow. I continue to get warmer and warmer on this run. My one dispute about Kelly Thompson writing it back at the start was that it's sometimes her voice feels a little bit lightweight. It kind of feels like she does a lot of contractions and Ghana, and she talks about video games and things that feel like a little too current for Black Widow, who I think of as being a little bit more austere, and that those are the lines that maybe should be given to Yelena, who's also in this comic. But it happened only once in this issue, and now that we're past the first arc and we're into the voice consistently more, this is really fun. You know, there's another super bad guy, spy agency, whatever, and she's trying to figure out how to take him down. She's got the help of Yelena, she's got Anya Karzan, the Spider-Girl, and it's just all characters that I like, but I can't emphasize enough, Elena Casagrande's art is off the charts amazing. I'm a huge fan of her, and Jordi Belair is doing such a smart thing with how flat the color look is. Look how flat the colors are here. They're gradients, they're shine, but look at just how Nat is allowed to hold those 3 or 4 colors that she is. I think that is so attractive, so fun. Okay. Next up, we have Cable. Now, of course, if you watch This Week in X on this channel, you've already heard me do more than a minute about Cable. The thing I love about this series is that Phil Noto, his art just adapts and adapts. This is not quite the same Phil Noto look that Phil Noto was giving us way back at the beginning of the series, and I think that it has changed and adapted a little bit along with this journey that young Cable has been on, or as I call him, Table, short for portmanteau for Teen Cable. I never thought I would care about this character. It's ridiculous that I care about him, but this brings him to a crescendo in a satisfying way. It leaves me with a lot of questions, and it's just been fun. Of all of these Krakoan Age books, I think Cable might be the only one where if you haven't been reading any X-Men at all, and you just wanted to be entertained, and you're like, hey, what can I read and be entertained by? I would say just pick up Cable. It's 12 issues. Just go for it. And as long as they stick the landing, which they've been given time to do, unlike some other X books, I do think that it's probably going to stick the landing and be very recommendable. Okay, Daredevil. This was the book that fell out of my top 10 this week, and it's hard to entirely explain why, because it's still one of the best series out there, still one of my top recommendations. This cover, by the way, holy wow, like, oh my goodness. The wings, the blood, the masks, amazing. But I gotta talk about the insides too. That cover, by the way, is by Chichetto, who I love. The art was good, but it felt like Sunny Go. Actually, it wasn't Sunny Go. It was Marcio Menes, who made that explains it. The colors just felt a little step back. It wasn't as pushed. The red didn't strike me as red as it was. And it felt very in-between chaptery. We kind of ended on a big note in the last issue. And this just felt like more prison stuff for Matt. I think the challenge of having Matt in prison is that it's happened a lot of times before. So if you're going to do the Matt in prison thing and he's in trouble and somebody's punching him or whatever, you've got to really give it a shine that nobody's given it before, and I don't know if Zdarsky's all the way there here, and I also wanted more time with Elektra. I just wanted more, so it wasn't bad, but it didn't like get to that like top of the heap that usually this Daredevil title is for me. Still, again, highly recommended. But if I have a top Marvel book this week, y'all, it is Eternals. I know some people, I talked to my friends and on Twitter about this. I know some people feel it's moving slowly. I acknowledge that. I know some people who are big Eternals fans, they do exist, like Harry. They just feel like it's retreading or it's making them too similar to X-Men. Here's the thing. I love that it's baking in these little moments of Eternal's history. It's doing the thing that Gillen is not doing on Once and Future, which is it's educating me as I go. He's playing with this voice of the machine. The voice of the machine is getting tangled up. Is it the narrator? Is it personified? Is it the commentary on the recap pages? It's tangling up if you can trust any of these Eternals. It kind of shows over the long arc of immortality that everybody winds up on their own team and the community becomes a fiction. And so none of them know each other as well as they know each other, even though we're flashing back to these tales of kind of the epochal indelible moments of how well they know each other. And its similarity to X-Men to me just shows that maybe all machines, all human or mutant machines or eternal machines bend in the same direction. I am just so excited by this book. I really, really am. I didn't think I was going to like it. I'm sometimes a little sour on Gillen these days, but I'm just so entranced. Speaking of books I'm not entranced by, The Marvels by Kurt Busiek, Yildiray Cinar, and Richard Eisenov. I don't really understand who this book is for. So Kurt Busiek has inserted this fictional country in the history of Marvel, Sian Kong, that's taking the place of, Vietnam and Korea, and a lot of the countries that have been, their events have been moved forward by the sliding timescale, such that our characters can't be veterans of those wars or whatever. They said, let's make up a country. But what's cool about the first two issues is it spent a lot of time in the present with heroes that have a connection to that past. And then it would spend a little bit of time in the past. And that actually kept me really hooked. And I was like, wow, maybe I'm really going to like this. This issue, when I tell you there is nothing that happens in this book, it's Ben Grimm and Franklin Richards before they're the Fantastic Four. Franklin is called in to consult in something in this country because they found the remains of some giant monster. And they have a meeting about it. That's it. Oh, and it has Batroc the Leaper before he's fully Batroc, but still in his Batroc costume to be like, tee-hee, these characters knew each other already. Like, I'm sorry, that's not enough. I'm over time, but I'm still ranting. I'm like continuity cop number 1, and if you cannot get me with a continuity series like this, then who is it for? Okay. Shang-Chi versus Captain America, but really it's just Shang-Chi issue number 2. This was good. I liked it. The art was good. Here's the thing. A lot of books, when they just want to have villains as kind of like background, they go for the stock plot of it's the auction, it's the villain auction, and the one hero's at the villain auction, but they might find them out, or maybe they want to be found out. Like, I feel like I've now seen it in 4 Marvel books already this year, so I think just the commonness of that plot dragged it down a little bit. But it's a very fun fight between Shang-Chi and Captain America, and I think this new status quo for Shang-Chi, which is like he's kind of taken over his father's crime empire, and he's trying to be a hero, but he has to do some villainous things to thwart worse villainous things. But does that make him a villain? Like, can you do villainous things and still be a hero? It's a really cool question, and I think it's different, and it gives Shang-Chi something to do that feels uniquely his. So I still recommend this, even if the story was a little bit samey. Also, pretty strong art and colors, although there's some stuff in here where you get the like total lack of a face, which is one of my pet peeves, but it's still pretty strong artwork. Only a couple more Marvel books, then I'll take your questions. So if you got Q&A stuff queued up, let me know. It'll be a couple minutes, and then we'll get to it. This is Star Wars Dr. Aphra. So I know a lot of people loved Kieran Gillen on Dr. Aphra. I was not reading Star Wars in that period. I started reading again now they're in the Empire Strikes Back time frame. And so I'm reading Dr. Aphra with no background. She's pretty cool. I really like her, but it feels like she actually is the closest to this War of the Bounty Hunters because it feels really organically tied to her plot. This issue, it's a little bit of kind of like a fizzy drink because it's just, she goes into space looking for somebody, they find that they've died and they have to deal with this bounty hunter. It feels very removable, almost like it could have been an annual. I think aspects of it will be important, but it didn't really feel like it came directly from the things that have been happening in the past few issues. But in a way, I liked that about it because I do think that some of the cast and the stories kind of gotten away from me, like a little bit, like why do they all really matter, or was I supposed to care? Which is partially me problem, but it's partially like it's wrangling a lot of big stuff, and I liked that it came back and was tight. I think that's a good skill when your book can go really broad and then get really tight and change back and forth. So I think to have one tight issue was not a bad thing. Now we have Star Wars High Republic. This has been a fun series, but if you remember, the High Republic series I'm really obsessed with is the YA, the all ages one. That's High Republic Adventures from IDW. This, guess what? This setting, which I have no experience with, I have never read Star Wars or seen anything Star Wars in this period before. It's really wild. It's like previous to the prequels. And it's just like there's Jedis everywhere. They're magical. There's all these cool space stations. It's kind of like the decadent period. And the thing is that this picks up a second arc, but it's very much a continuation of everything in the first arc. And I'm okay with that. Like, I still like it as a book, but part of me just wants more. I want like 5 more High Republic titles. I just want more stuff. I'm a glutton for High Republic. Just pour it all over my body, right? So I think part of me was just like a little bit disappointed that we kind of stayed with the same plot. Also, George Ginty, who many of you might know from Buffy the Vampire Slayers season 8. You also might know them from Extremists with Leah Williams. I think he kind of draws everybody as a kid sometimes. Like, you know how some artists can't draw kids? He draws only kids. So sometimes some of the faces and stuff in this made me kind of be like, some of these people are supposed to be older than others, but it was still a really fun comic book. And now we have the United States of Captain America. I think there's one more after this. Anyway, this is the much hyped series that is introducing new Captains America. The idea is that there's almost like a Captain America core, but Steve Rogers and the Falcon, Sam Wilson, had nothing to do with it. These are just people organically who are saying, look, if I'm going to defend America and the values of America, why would I not call myself Captain America, you know? Which I think is a brilliant, brilliant idea. And it's framed around this idea that somebody is trying to both frame Steve Rogers for some stuff and also maybe thin out this herd of Captain Americas, and we don't know who it is. There's somebody very fast. There's somebody very evasive, and kind of everything about it was fun. The writing was good. The art by Dale Eaglesham was great. The character design of this new Captain America character was good. It was just really entertaining, and I think if we've got to have like a middle Captain America book now that this week, I think the Coates' run is ending before we start a new run, this is a good book, and I'm kind of excited. Like, I really like the idea of this, everybody saying, I'm Captain America, no, I'm Captain America, you know, around the country. I'm kind of into it. So this book got me really on its side really, really quickly. And then X Factor. You know, I know we had an hour-long conversation, and I don't even feel like the conversation fully hit everything I was trying to say in This Week in X, so I want to try to condense it down to this. I think if you're a writer who wants to write about something from the real world, it doesn't have to be your personal experience, but you've got to treat it with care and with space and make sure that that experience that's not yours is not just being sensationalized or used to provide value to the other characters or to you as an author. And I know how much this creative team cares about these characters. I've seen them talk about the characters, but it really feels like Prodigy's plot in this issue was not really used to advance him. It was used to give other people moments, and it was used to kind of like backpat this book to put a set of parentheses on either side of the plot. I think it's always been a crime scene book. I think it's always been about trauma. I don't think any of that is surprising, but I just think you have to have a little bit more care. And when you use one of those stories that's not yours, that's from real life, that affects a critically endangered community, you just have to give it a little bit more space, and I just don't think this issue got all the way there. Honestly, my white voice is not the number one voice you need to hear talking about this, but at the same time, in the same way that Leah Williams is writing about this stuff, I want you to hear that as a white voice, I'm paying attention to what black voices are saying, what queer voices are saying, and I want to amplify that and let you know that the way that I originally came to the issue when I first read it is not the way that I'm thinking about it now, because I'm listening, and I think that's a positive thing. So I would encourage you to go out. I think Charles Pulliam at IO9 wrote well about it. A lot of people on Twitter, the one person's handle I'm not really good at saying, but I'm just going to go on Twitter and find it, because I'm not going to find it fast enough for y'all. But there are people who have said really great stuff about this, is my point, and I would encourage you to listen to all voices. Okay, let's do some Q&A, and then we'll get into the indie list, which is so long. Oh my gosh, you guys talked a lot. Okay. So what new writers have impressed me this year so far? Oh gosh, I'm not good at doing that stuff off the top of my head. I have to say Stephanie Phillips. She's everywhere. She's in your books writing them. She's at Indie. She's at DC. She's writing short stories. She's on ongoing series. I really think that like we're witnessing the birth of somebody who's just really an all-rounder, who can cover everything, who writes everything well, and it's really exciting, and I am excited by that. I also really like Dan Waters, even though his Homesick Pilots didn't hit for me. I just like his ideas. I think it's fine if one of his series didn't hit for me. It might just not have been my jam, but he's been around for a few years now, and he's really exciting. And then Brennan Easton, I feel like everything he's written, I'm just like totally wild for. Marvel lately has not bringing in as many new voices, I feel like, so I'm not as energized by that. So I'm kind of like thinking through all the DC stuff and also indie stuff that I'm reading, which we'll get into. Oh, sorry, I didn't highlight that comment, so you didn't even know what I was talking about. I could go on and on about starting acoustic guitar, shopping for guitars, all this stuff. Here's the thing I'll say. Practice is important, skills are important, but you need to have a song that you will die if you cannot learn to play. For me, that was Ziggy Stardust. I was like, if I cannot learn how to do... Oh, I'm in drop D still, but... When I first bought my guitar many, many, many years ago, I was like, if I don't learn how to do that, I will die. And so I learned how to play guitar. Would I have gotten better at the skills if I practiced them more past learning Ziggy Stardust? Probably. But I've been playing guitar for decades. I've been a band leader. I'm quite proficient. I can hold my own, and it's all because of Ziggy Stardust. Yeah, I just think that there's some artists who are pushing the boundary of the medium, not because they're doing anything so different, but because it's clear that they will let their lines take their pens where they want to go. Trad Moore to me is always the number one example of that, of just Trad Moore will let that pen take him anywhere on the damn page. And I love, love, love it. Yeah, Black Knight, it just didn't hit for me this week. I'm trying, if you did not notice, I just was not that into my Marvel pulls this week. It was way more exciting on indie pulls. I kind of was like, about a lot of the Marvel ones, other than Cable, other than Captain America, other than Eternals. Speaking of Spurrier, I did not like Spurrier until I read Labyrinth Coronation a couple of years ago. I think that was got to be Boom or IDW. I forget, it was the Jim Henson license. But it was the first time that I really saw Spurrier's madness in the way he writes his characters make sense, because it was a totally mad environment. I think after reading that, I've understood him better. It doesn't mean I like his older stuff more, but there's just something stylistically with him, and I could do a whole episode on it, that doesn't always work for me. Dan, I hope you're still on the stream. I didn't get to say hi to you in the middle of all that. And oh my gosh, maybe I can't answer everything. I do love the art on Black Widow. I love the magic and Cable dynamic. All right, Eternals, people loving Eternals is great for me. And I think that's it. And I did manage to say something useful about X Factor in that many seconds, but that's it. All right, we'll do one more because it's about Marvel, and then we'll move on to indies because there's so many. If I was a Marvel editor, who would I try to recruit to write Cap now that Coates' run is finishing up? That's really tough. It's part of it is like, what do you want from Cap at this point? I think Coates did a really great run of showing Cap's kind of at odds with the American dream, and what it means, and how he's a symbol of it, and how people don't still trust him. And I think with Cap, you've got to constantly be cycling through what he is. Is he a super soldier? Is he promoting the American dream? Is he defending America? Is he doing some crazy sci-fi thing? It never pays to hit the same themes repeatedly with Cap. So I think we need somebody to take him away from that stuff right now. It might be time for more sci-fi Cap. It might be time for a less political, more adventurous Cap. Not that I ever shy away from politics, but just because we just did it and it's going to feel repetitive. So I don't know that there's an author that like really, really excites me thinking about that. I do remember I really loved that Captain American annual a year or two ago by Teenie Howard, but she's pretty busy right now. Somebody like G. Willow Wilson, it feels like somebody who'd be really exciting to write Cap to me, but she's off on I think a novel break right now. So I'd have to give some thought. I'm never really good about playing that like human database with writers on the spot like that, but I think as an editor, you've got to think, what is he going to do? What space is he going to hold in the Marvel Universe? Also, I kind of like this idea of a Cap Corps. I think that was something that Coates did well in his run, putting characters around Cap. He had a huge supporting cast. I think let's see Falcon as a Cap. Let's see Bucky. Let's see Sharon. Let's hug all these characters close to Cap and keep doing that. All right, Saladin Ahmed would be really good in Cap. That is a great suggestion. Okay, I've got to move on to indie books now, or else we're never going to get there. No, I didn't open them already. All right, there's a lot, so it might take me one or two tries. Talk amongst yourselves to open all of these pictures. So as I read, it worked in a single try, yes. As I read, I save each of the covers, and then I save or screenshot the credits, and then I try to capture an internal page too. Sometimes I make a goof. You'll see two autumnal covers here, but we're going to do our best. All right, y'all. I will take a break somewhere around the M's to drink some water, which I should do now. And I'll answer some questions midway through, because there's a lot more to talk about, but we got to get started. I feel like maybe the clock should like be elastic. Like maybe I should have less time when I have more books, but... So the Autumnal. This was one of my top 10 series for the end of 2020. I was so into it. It's one of these vault series that's horror and that has a fixed duration. It's going to be a certain amount of issues. They know that. It's got just enough runway. The thing I can say in its favor is it ended in the way it promised to end. And I think that's a good thing. I do not need a frigging mystery box. Just see the story through to its conclusion. That said, in ending the way that it did, I think that it went a little vaguer than was satisfying. It's not a Deus Ex Machina because we knew that it was going to happen. But I just felt like after having such affection for these characters and building up to this and putting it off, that at the ending, it kind of rushed through a lot of beats in a way that wasn't satisfying to me. Part of what made me really love this book was that the experience of the single mother at the center really appealed to me, my experience with my parents, my experience with my kid, even though I'm not a single parent. And I just felt like a little bit of that heart got lost. I think I could still recommend the whole series, but not as strongly as I could recommend it prior. And honestly, due to me not really feeling that, I wound up not pulling Barbaric this week. I just haven't really been vibing with how these Vault series ends. I think they get great pitches. I think they greenlight awesome stuff. I think everybody should try their stuff. But for me, it's now been like 6 or 7 series in a row where I got to the end and I was like, this was not satisfying. Or I dropped it before the end. So I'm getting a little cooler on Vault. Sometimes I get into a publisher where I just pull everything, and I think that's a great way to find a new publisher until you understand your taste with them, and then you don't have to pull everything. So I'm kind of moving towards that a little bit more with Mad Cave and Behemoth and Scout right now to try to get to know them. But I feel like I know Vault, and now I don't have to read every book. When I read their solicits, I'm like, oh, it's going to be like that. I probably will like it, or I probably won't. And that's one of the great benefits of doing all the voracious reading that I do. So I didn't read Barbaric. Okay, speaking of Scout, okay, y'all, strap in. You know when you start playing a role-playing game on a game system or computer, and at the beginning you're like level 1, you have the crappiest armor, and you're like going outside of the town, you're like fighting rats. Do you ever like think through like what is happening when I come back with the rats? Like, does anybody care? I'm covered in rat blood. I got all these tails, and then the shop is like, I guess I'll give you a gold piece for the tails. Gosh, bring less rats. This is that. It just feels like it so much, but it's got a crazy concept on top of it, which is, I'm only spoiling the very beginning of the first issue. This woman's husband is killed by feral unicorns. She doesn't know why. All she knows is she is going to kill those fucking unicorns now. It is hilarious, and the art, as you can see in this page, is every bit as good as the cover art. It's really funny. It really plays with those RPG tropes without being like, wink, wink, this is about a video game. It just has that feeling. I'm in. Scout, you can buy their comics from their website as PDF copies. They're the same price as physical, but they're not on Comixology. I've been a little up and down. There's been some stuff I've read from Scout that I find really disturbing, and not just in like this story is disturbing way, but as like, wow, that maybe crossed the bounds of good taste, but this is not one of those. Okay. Next we have Kanto. Actually, I've dropped this, so this is just here as a placeholder. This is a really cute series. It's like almost all ages, but it's about this little clockwork person who he needs his heart to tick, and he wants all the people to have ticking hearts, and so they escape the grasp of this mad wizard, and they're trying to find the thing that can extend their hearts. But the thing with it is it has these cute little super deformed characters like this guy. I can't tell any of them apart. So I was having more fun when there was just Kanto in the first series, but this is the third series, and now there's like a few of them. And after the last series, I just could not tell who's speaking. You will notice there's a theme with me. I like really distinctive character designs, and I like caption boxes. I like to be informed, and when it loses that, I kind of lose it a little. Now, if you're somebody who, unlike me, does not read 200 new comic books a month and really doesn't get as annoyed by those character differentiation things, you might really like it. It is super adorable. It's this fun kind of storybooky thing. It reminds me in tone of Labyrinth, where it's like a little bit scary, but it's not so scary that it's not a kid thing. It's just on the like dramatic, creepy side of kid things, and it's really adorable in that way. So that's not me saying I don't read it, or I don't suggest reading it. I just dropped it personally because I'm trying to drop more stuff. Chess, I looked all over for this because it really seemed like it would be a neat indie superhero mercenary thing, even though she's kind of broke backing there in the picture. But Chess Comics does not seem, or Second Sight Comics doesn't seem to have any comics available to buy on the internet. I looked and looked. So it would have been in my poll, but there was nothing to pull. Okay, moving on. Oh boy. Crossover. I want to talk about it without spoiling it. It tells you right off the bat in the first issue that the superhero universe we know has crossed over into the real world, which is where this comic is set. And because Image is Image, it gets to use a lot of the toys in the toy box from Image and other indies too, to show you the effect of that, which there's a certain amount of fun in it. It's not for me. I think it just kind of missed the mark a little bit. But this issue is a standalone because it's Chip Zdarsky writing in the universe, writing him as the real world author, Chip Zdarsky, who's on the run because the comics have broken through the real world and he's afraid of what his comics might do or say to him now that they're in the real world. I'm not spoiling it. That's the premise. There's stuff I could spoil, trust me. It's a fun issue, and if you like Zdarsky's humor, I think that it's probably worth reading. You don't have to be reading the rest of Crossover, and I think it actually just might sell you on the rest of Crossover and the concept. otherwise, this has been a drop for me. I'm probably not going to continue with issue 8. And when we get to issue 8, maybe I'll talk to a little bit more of that. This is another one I tried, Cult of Dracula. I forget what publisher it's from, but I'm just super into every possible Dracula thing. So it's only been coming out like 2 months behind the new issue coming out. So issue 4 was out this week. So I read issue 1 and I was going to read issue 2, but it was bad. But look, maybe you'll like it. It's about kind of a modern day religious American cult that's telling the Dracula story. Like, they're not worshiping the Dracula. It's like the Dracula Bram Stoker novel story as told, with Dracula as like the leader of this cult, and Mina is an investigative reporter who's investigating the cult. It's just kind of clumsy. Like, the art didn't really get there for me. The colors didn't get there. It kind of just felt a little underdeveloped, despite these really cool atmospheric covers. Man, covers can sell you a comic. Department of Truth. Oh boy. So Department of Truth is heavy, and it's about conspiracies, and it's about kind of the underbelly of American life. The thing is, I think it's maybe a little too heavy for people, or maybe it's like a little too detailed for people. And here's a chance to kind of just jump in on something that's a chapter that's a little bit more X-Files-y. It's about Sasquatches. Oh, we'll get there. It's fun. It kind of tells you what you need to know about the main character without needing to know everything from the first 9 issues. It has 6 pages of weathered cursive handwriting in it, which I skipped entirely. So if they said something that was great for the plot, God bless. But it's fun. I think it's a place you can jump in. Honestly, I think the first 4 issues of this are so strong that you don't need to jump in here. But if you're the kind of person who just wants to like sample one, I think you could either sample the first issue or samples this. Again, I think it's going to be fun that it can kind of alternate these much more Monster of the Weeky X-Files alongside of the more kind of like long game issues. So you will definitely hear me talk about this again. Okay. Dune House Atreides. This has been pretty high on my list all this year. It's maybe creeping a little bit down just because it's starting to feel like maybe it's just playing for time at this point instead of like telling a really vital story. The thing is, it's the prologue to the first Dune book. So if you know the first Dune book, if you've seen David Lynch's movie, if you're planning on seeing the movie later this year, it's kind of giving you where all these characters came from a whole generation prior to them. But it also kind of feels like now it's just like playing for time. Like, okay, I guess we're going to just show you this next event that you've heard of. And it doesn't feel as much of a tight narrative. Whereas the first like 4 or 5 issues kind of felt like, wow, here's like a burst of really important plot things that I've always kind of wondered about when I was reading Dune. Now it's kind of languishing a little bit. So I know they're going to end the series, I think, at like 9 or 10 and launch a new series. I'll probably keep reading. I really like the building out of the history of this Dune universe. I probably will reread Dune at some point this year. It's a book that I really enjoyed a mumble amount of years ago. So that can be fun. The art has been relatively strong. This was a gasp-worthy moment of this. You know, this the first person from off of the planet to ride the worm prior to the events of Dune. Really, really thrilling art. Great colors, too, in the background of the sky there. Honor and Curse, I did not get a chance to read this week. I read the #1 a while ago, and I was not following Mad Cave as closely. It's kind of like a, you know, learning to be a samurai thing, but the samurai has like a dark secret, and the #1's okay, but I didn't realize that it kept coming out so regularly, and now that I'm kind of in a Mad Cave zone, I'm probably going to read it all, so if I read it all by next week, I'll tell you about it next week. Okay. I know. Oh boy. Now you get to really hear me go off in a fun way. So I love Lady Death from the 90s. I just think she's fun. I know that it's like a TNA comic. I understand that. So I wanted to read Lady Death, and they were only releasing her digitally via Kickstarter for a while. So I was like, okay, I will go on Kickstarter and just like kickstart and get all the Lady Death, which are like $6 or $7 each. But they also have other comics. One is Hell Witch and this other one, La Muerta. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll just pledge for all of them, like, you know, supporting this indie comic maker. La Muerta is pretty much Punisher, but a lady, but with like a little bit of a supernatural influence, but maybe we don't even fully believe it. And it's actually kind of written a lot better than Lady Death, the first few. This is the 6th in a series of 1-shot and 2-shot stories. This, however, it really fell down a little bit just because it got really into the kind of rubber banding that I don't like. Like, the guy was dead, he's almost dead, but he's back. But now the other guy's stalking them, but he fell down, but he's alive. Like, I just feel like commit to a plot. Like, your plot is much stronger if you just let people get wounded and be hurt, if you let people die sometimes. And when you kind of rubber band everybody back and forth, it starts to feel like nothing is mattering anymore in the story. So I can't say that I recommend it, although I will say the first few issues were surprisingly strong. Made in Korea. This is issue #2. The first issue of this is freaking wild. It is just like crazy, out of this world conceptual. It's about a near future America. Clearly some things have changed in America. There's people who are infertile and they're getting these kind of like real life decoy kids that never grow older. And so we're also like viewing the life of a programmer at that company. It's very Mr. Anderson at the Matrix, like he's trying to figure out something, but he doesn't want the higher ups to notice it. And so he puts some special programming into one of these kids, and one of the kids gets shipped to America. And that's what's happening here. It's really neat. I'm really like on the edge of my seat. I don't know where it's going to go. It's a really cool concept. It's really exploring a lot of things about what it means to what heritage means, not only an Asian heritage, but what it means to be somebody's child, what it means to be their adopted child, what it means to enter a new society that you haven't been a part of. It's just like really smart sci-fi in a way that just really excites me and makes me want to read more. And I think, oh, there's an internal. Why don't we appreciate that internal page while I take a sip of water and check the Q&A? Oh, that is so kind. Billy said that this is their favorite weekly video on YouTube. I'm trying to find the cursor here because I'm old. Okay. I really love that. I know a lot of people are doing live shows. A lot of people talk about their polls for the week, their budget for the week, the preview stuff. And I'm just kind of trying to find my own space in a way that makes sense. And I know that, I'm putting up 8 videos a week. I might back off that a little bit. It has been a long, hard 3 months doing 6 to 8 videos a week. But I feel like this is something that's uniquely me. I don't feel like there's a lot of other people on the internet that can do this. And so I appreciate that you all show up for it. I know you don't all agree with all of my opinions, but I like trying to learn how to present them in a way that even when I don't like the book, you might still find something to like about the book. That is my mission statement. So if I'm just trashing books, you got to call me out on chat. Even when I don't like a book, I should be telling you what there is to like about it. Here's the thing. This Week in X is exclusive to X-Men because it's like that's the only book that puts out stuff that we could read every week. Batman's the only other book that we really could do that. Nobody else has content every week, except for, I guess, Spider-Man maybe with his new launch. But then we also have the podcast where we read older runs. We took a break from reading the classic X-Men because we were like, oh, maybe it's too old. Maybe people have read it already, which is why we've been doing Mars and Batman. I will say the Mars and Batman views have been a little bit low on YouTube. I mean, it's public. You can all see that. But they've actually been really, really strong in the podcast in terms of downloads. So it could just be that people for Mars and Batman are much more like they've read it or they're reading it and they want to like listen to it in their commute or their car ride. So I think we're going to continue to experiment with format. Faria is reading Aaron's Thor right now and loving it. It's one of my favorite runs of the past decade. So I think there's a strong chance that we might do Aaron's Thor at some future point. But I think it remains to be seen if that works better as a video format or better as a podcast format. Chip Zdarsky is a pen name, right? You would almost think a last name as weird as Zdarsky has to be a real name, because like who made that up? But you made it up. He is a fascinating dude. I just find him, he seems to have a really healthy way of thinking about the world in an objective way that allows him room to try things and be dumb, be wrong, make mistakes. He was actually visited Wellington just before the pandemic. And I had the chance to go and meet him and I didn't, and maybe I probably should have. I think because I wanted him to sign White Trees and I didn't have a physical copy and I like couldn't find anywhere to buy it. So I was like, oh, I don't have anything for him to sign. I should have just gone and met him. It's Chip Zdarsky. Made in Korea is really cool, y'all. I hope I hyped it up well enough for you. Okay, and now we're at the bottom. Hey, Super Cine. When I see your name really quickly, I think it says Super Simile for some reason. So just know that that's who you are in my head. I'm sorry, because some people see my name, and they think or my handle, and they think it's Chris Is, which is fine, because Chris is one of my given names, and I will absolutely answer to Chris. But some people don't realize it's Krisis. So I'm sorry for thinking your name was Super Simile. I've been meaning to apologize. Okay, let's get through the rest of these indies, shall we? Also, you have to tell me if this is a better time slot. Like, is this worse for you? Is this better for you? Were you finally able to come because it's in this time slot? Let me know. Okay. I really love this Marvel Action Captain Marvel book. It just like is the joy of my life every time it comes out. It's by Sam Maggs. Sam Maggs has such a great voice for Carol and pretty much every supporting character you can throw at her. I'm like, get Sam Maggs over. You want to talk about people I want to see writing a Marvel book? Get Sam Maggs writing like Squirrel Girl or any of the other kind of like champions, Riri, Viv Vision. Get her over to main Marvel. She's really good. And this issue is hilarious because Carol is stuck inside of a video game. And she's got to get out, and there's so many good gags. At one point, it turns into a fighting game, and she has to pick her Ms. Marvel. Now, this is for kids, so you can't give them the whole history of why she might not want to be any of these versions of herself, but it's embedded there. So if you're an adult reading it or you're reading it with your kids or the kids go back and read other stuff, they'll get it. My kid has read all of those parts of Ms. Marvel along with me, so she will get the joke. So I always buy the collection of this for my kid. The last couple of issues were like okay, but sometimes it really hits like just as well as the main Captain Marvel title. And this one, this is not even the only gag that hit that hard. I just had so much fun. So much fun. The podcast, by the way, is just called Crushing Comics. It's available everywhere you could find podcasts. It's on Stitcher. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, and it's on my site, crushingcrisis.com. It's really ultra findable, and it has the full This Week in... we're just going to set a timer for me to promote my podcast. It has the full This Week in X conversation every week of all of the issues together, and it also usually has an intro chat that we don't put on YouTube, which sometimes is the source of a lot of the in-jokes. And then also we've been doing the Morrison as one big episode every week, instead of split up as it is on YouTube. So you can just subscribe to the podcast. I'm happy for you to listen rather than watch. Totally up to you. By the way, IDW never released this digitally this week. And also, I've been really disliking the series, but we will save my bagging on it until I actually have an issue to read. For some reason, they just never put it up. I don't know why. Okay. Monstrous. So here's the thing. I dropped this an arc ago, but I've never had the chance to talk about it online, so I'm not going to bag on it. I just want to say my piece that I've never gotten to say. Okay? I think this story is one of the best stories being told in comics. It is so big, so smart, so adventurous. Marjorie Liu is a genius. I'm so happy she won an Eisner for it. I could not support it more. And Sana Takeda, amazing artist. I mean, the whole world, beautiful. Here's the thing. There's a really tight shot of I didn't buy this, so it's just like the second page from Comixology. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can change my sharing. Look at this texture. Oh, it's still too little. If you can see all this texture in here, for some reason, behind every panel, on every page, there's this cross-hatching. And the cross-hatching, it's constant. It never goes away. It runs through the whole series. And after reading the first 25 issues of it, I was starting to have trouble seeing. Like, it was turning into like a magic eye thing. And I know it sounds I'm complaining a lot about my vision. I really don't have all these vision problems. But it's just like, why? Why is it on every panel, on every page? I don't understand. So I eventually I couldn't appreciate the art anymore. I tried zooming out. I tried like actually finding like a thing that would make my screen look blurry, to blur it a little. I tried like squinting at it. I think it's supposed to make you think that it's like archival a little bit, but I don't understand it, and I just want to like Monstrous and I can't. So that's my piece about Monstrous. Maybe one day I'll binge it on a day that my eyes are feeling strong, because it's pretty cool. Another book that nobody put onto digital this week, Everybody's Asleep at the Wheel, the Oz Annual from Zenescope. This is the second week in a row Zenescope has not put one of their books on digital. Maybe it's a strategy for smaller publishers because they want to like have people buy physically first and then put it with digital the week after, which is fine, but it just means that my pull list gets all messed up because I go by preview polls physically, but then I look for those books digitally and then I couldn't find it. Okay. Parasomnia. So this is a new Dark Horse. It's an original book by Cullen Bunn and Andrea Muti, who's everywhere. They just did The Maniac of New York. They're on Bunny Mask now. They just pump stuff out. Muti draws or paints in watercolor in such a way that sometimes it's makes me feel like I'm a little bit at a distance from what's going on, but I do like that style. I've enjoyed other artists who work in this kind of watercolor style, like on Jeff Lemire and Nguyen's Descender. But it kind of is the Max. Does anybody else remember the Max? I love the Max. We should have a whole show about that sometime, where there's somebody who's having it's kind of a psychological break where they're having one identity in the real world and they're having one identity in this other world, and they're kind of chasing the same mystery in both. In this case, a kid who's been kidnapped, maybe murdered. And I like that. But I just think that this didn't ground me enough in either of the worlds. I almost felt grounded in the fantasy world. I didn't feel quite grounded enough in the real world, but it's an interesting enough concept, and Bunn is good enough that I think on name, I probably will get number 2, but I'm not quite ready to recommend it yet. But if you like that concept, that kind of two worlds concept, Ether is another book recently that was like that. Highly recommended the first story of Ether. Really, really fun. You should pick it up. So I'm back on my Spawn bullshit, for those of you who have not heard. Because the main title has been feeling a little bit better edited now than it was a year or two, and I have to say, this issue is fun, y'all. I just really friggin' had a great time. Let's beat up some vampires, man. Spawn, it's Carlos Barbieri on art, and David Ramos on colors. This guy does this whole thing about this guy. He's such a good person. He's so nice, but he's got a dark secret, and Spawn's gonna find it out. And it was just fun, you know. Spawn is a fun comic that gets to do those kind of plots. It kind of tied it into the bigger heaven and hell stuff. But you've heard me make this critique a couple times. Let me give you the positive version of it. That this really did this thing where it made the story so small that it made the bigger plot make a lot of sense and seem a lot more vital to me. So by kind of focusing on this one person doing evil, this one thing, this one MacGuffin, I kind of was like, oh, I get what the stakes are now. And books that can do that, get small and get big, they're good books. And honestly, Todd McFarlane's narration here really worked. It didn't feel extraneous. Like, you could have skipped it, but you could have not skipped it, and it added something. So that's when Spawn to me is at its best, and I really enjoyed it. Also, again, great art. Okay, we're into our next. Oh, Star Wars Adventures Weapon of the Jedi. So Star Wars Adventures has been doing this cool thing where they take one of the Star Wars novels that's come out and they just adapt it for YA as 2 double-sized issues rather than doing a 4-issue series. There was one earlier this year, Smuggler's Run, that's like right on the verge of being in my top 10 books. It's probably number 12 right now. It was so good. If you love Han and Chewie stuff, go out and read Star Wars Smuggler's Run, either as a book, it was by Greg Rucka, I think, or as a comic book. The comic was outstanding. This one is like a little kind of middle of the road for me, only because I think that it sets up that Luke is on this run for the resistance, and he gets injured, or his ship gets shot at, so he's got to go to this planet where he's to land, and he's feeling a pull of the Force there, and he finds this old temple. All this sounds so cool, right? But then at the temple, I don't know if he went through enough of a transformation. It definitely fills in a little bit of how he got to be as good of a Jedi as we see him being, but it just felt like it was maybe Lucasfilm saw them pitch a certain plot that they wanted to push for and be like, ooh, what if Luke were to find this or do this? And they were like, hold your horses there, Sonny. You can't do that much stuff in a novel or in a comic book about Luke, because Luke is we got to trumpet the big Luke revelation. So it was fun, and I enjoyed it. It was really, as you can see, the colors, I know I'm over time, but I gave you all that background about the other series. It was fun. If you like that kind of stuff that fills in how Luke became the Jedi that he was in the course of the original trilogy, I think it's worth reading. But again, that prior Smuggler's Run was really amazing. Okay. Ooh, Vampire the Masquerade. Okay. Remember how I was saying earlier, I'm always about vampire bullshit? And remember also earlier I said I was kind of soft on Vault? Well, this is me peak vampire bullshit and in love with Vault. I am obsessed with this comic book. This was such a good issue. I'm giddy to even get to talk about it. Okay, Vampire the Masquerade is a role-playing game. It's kind of like D&D, but it's not like D&D. But I can't explain the whole game to you because I don't have the source books yet. They're in one of my upcoming previews orders. But the whole idea is that the vampires they live in a society. There's people who are leaders. There's people of different skills. There's people who have machinations. There's different courts. And this is mostly following one vampire who wants to be on the outskirts of that, but keeps getting sucked into the middle, closer and closer. And watching how the courts in this one city, I think it's Minneapolis, St. Paul, are crumbling around her because things are coming apart. This issue brings everything that's been happening in this series to a head. So she's at the center, the court is falling apart. Finally, we get a meaningful human resistance, which has been teased at but hasn't happened. It's a great book. It's got great art. It has a backup story by Teenie Howard that's really strong. It makes me giddy. I love it. If you love vampire stuff, just go and pick up the first issue from Vault. It's on Comixology. Read it and see if you like it. You do not need to know the game to appreciate the series. I don't know a darn thing about the game. I just picked up the series to pick it up because it's vampire shit, and I love, as you can see, I love vampire shit, and I'm obsessed. It's, again, this is a hair out of my top 10. It's my number 16 comic, really. Okay, now we have, gosh, the stream, I have to say, the internet has not dropped out a single time. Maybe the time slot is in our favor. Vampirella, I just want to comment because I've never got to say before. I actually dropped this, but it's really good. And if you like Christopher Priest and you can deal with Christopher Priest sometimes just monologuing through a straight issue as the author, even though it's his characters, but in his voice, then you should read it because the art is really, really cool. It's super transgressive and weird. But Christopher Priest at a point, I just can't. Especially after that Deathstroke run, which I actually really love and highly recommend. This just was a little too priesty priest for me. Maybe I'll go back and binge it at some point, but I just couldn't with the month-to-month on it. And also, sometimes his monologuing kind of verges on preaching. And I'm fine with the characters preaching to each other, but don't preach to me as the author through the characters at the other characters. But again, if you think this art looks cool, and if you love Priest and you like Vampirella, get off your beaten track and try out this book. Okay. What's next? This is another one that I dropped. I've been putting ones that I dropped not to beat up on them, but to get to talk about them since I've never talked about them on the channel before, and to practice my whole explaining why you might like it even though I don't. The thing about We Only Find Them When They're Dead by Al Ewing is it's such a cool, big idea. It's such a rangy universe. For me, this is purely an art thing. Simone de Mayo does this thing where it's just all like light and reflections and nothing feels entirely solid. Like it almost feels like everything has a little bit of transparency to it. And it's just not appealing to me in this setting. I think he's been a Transformers artist, and I think on Transformers I probably would have really liked him because it's more like blocky, robot-y shapes like this top panel, but when he does humans, I kind of lose them. Like, I can't really tell if her face is supposed to be in front of her hair or behind her hair there, so really cool comic. The concept is that when gods die, they become material, and once they become material, they're these huge galactic-sized things, and then you can, like, farm them, basically. You can take all the things that are on their body, and so what happens when one crew has, you know, history? Oh, and there's a whole like God's Bodies police force. And what happens when there's one crew who has a history with that and who have maybe a different intent for what they want to do with the God Bodies? Really, really cool. Oh my gosh. White, I spoke to this author on Twitter last night. He's at Kwanzaa. His name is Kwanzaa Oza Jefo. And I was like, where is it on digital? Because I've read his Black. I've read his Black as AF. I really, really enjoy his vision. Talk about somebody I want to see right at Marvel. I don't know if he would ever be interested. I would buy whatever Marvel would hire him to do. And he tweeted at Black Mask, and Black Mask said it's going to be up this week. So I will absolutely read it. I might actually binge all of the Black series because I bought them all previously and just talk about it next week. But I'm so excited. It's a universe where all Black people have superpowers. It is incredibly, incredibly political in the way that it handles that and the things that it says about America in showing how Black people are treated. And I just am wild for it. I love it. And I can't wait to read it once it's on digital in 2 short days. Okay, White Lily. This is, I'm going to give myself a minute, but if I go long, I just go long, okay? This is why I read weird, obscure comics. You will not find anyone else on the internet, I swear, that is picking this up right now. I've never heard it talked about. I've never seen it anywhere. I mean, somebody did, because it was on Kickstarter. It was originally a Kickstarter book, and it was Kickstarted as digital, and then Red 5 picked it up and did the physical issues. But the digital versions are still available on Comixology, and they're only $1 each. And they're all 30-page issues. This was a 40-page issue. So for $5, it's a whole trade of however many, 4 times 320, 170 pages. It's about the first real-life female fighter pilot that ever shot down anyone. She was a Russian pilot during World War II. She was a Polish Jew who emigrated to Russia to flee the Nazis, and she wound up being she's a training pilot, and they tap her to be a trainer for the army, and they see how good she is, and she gets promoted, and it's all real. It's sourced from real stuff. And she has another woman that moves up through the ranks with her, also real, also sourced from real stories. This, I cried so hard at the end of this. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but like, it's not perfect. But I told you I was going to go over time. It's not perfect, and some of the stuff is clearly apocryphal, and it's not like really, really from real life, because there's no way that they could fully know all the things that they're talking about here. But the art was really strong throughout. Unfortunately, the artist in the beginning of it passed away in the middle of working on the book, but then they got another artist who was also amazing, and it's just a cool story. I like real life stuff when it like gets me deeper into somebody's story that I've never heard of before, that's never been exposed before. And here are these 2 women that between them shot down over a dozen Nazi planes and like meaningfully contributed to Russia's war effort against Germany in World War II. Fascinating. For $5, I mean, if you don't like it, you only spent $5. This is one of those ones that I'm telling you, like, if any of that sounded cool, just take my word for it. Try the first issue with $1, see where it goes. It does have one part where you're going to go like, oh, is this going into like a weird sexism kind of place where the fact that these 2 pilots are women are being used in like a risque way to get me more interested. But no, you have to remember that it was adapted from a film script, and in the film script, they kind of needed that moment of sexism to kind of ground them, but the whole comic doesn't become about that, okay? I'm telling you, like, get through that one page if it bothers you. Okay. Wow. Is there one more? Oh, my comic of the week, I think, is the only one that's left. I'm not putting a timer on. I can talk about this for an hour, okay? And then I gotta go get my plug because I forgot to plug in the computer and it's gonna die. But not before I'm done talking about this comic book. Y'all, get with You Promised Me Darkness. This comic is so fucking weird. A comet has passed over the Earth many times. I forget if it's like Halley's Comet or whatever. And every time it passes over the Earth, some amount of people get powers. And then they become this whole generation of people who get powers. And then the comet passes again and people get different powers. But as time accumulates, more of these people are kind of like going against each other and having opinions about each other. So we're in this one town. We're focused on these two factions. This one guy who's this kind of like chatty alien. He's not an alien, I don't think. He started out on Earth, but he's kind of like trying to protect everybody and put them under his wing. But he's super eccentric and can't keep his timeline straight, so he bounces all around. And then there's the person who's maybe trying to kill everybody, not only all of the comet people because he's devouring them, but also maybe the whole Earth. Okay, now that I've said that, let me show you the art. It is wild. It is all in black and white. Sometimes there's like a zip tone like on the face at the bottom, but it is no gray. I mean, it is black and white. It is so evocative. It feels dangerous. The people's powers are crazy. One of them is a cat, turned into a cat, and in order to teleport people, she coughs up hairballs, and everybody climbs into this hairball that gets bigger and bigger, and then it teleports them. It feels like weird, like transgressive late 80s, early 90s Vertigo, back when Vertigo meant scary instead of just meaning colorful or different. It's just so strange. Every issue is 30 to 40 pages. They're only $2 each on Comixology. They are so wild. This issue, I think, I wouldn't start with number 3, just start with number 1. But this issue kind of pushes the bounds of how you can tell this narrative and kind of like how broken you can make it and how many different timelines it can bounce around to. It maybe was like asked a lot of you, but I think the first 2 issues kept the promise so well that it was worth it. Go and spend the $2. If you like this kind of black and white stuff, if you like early 90s Vertigo, if you like the weirdness of this concept, it almost feels like the art, by the way, it almost feels like John Paul Leon at points, and how detailed it gets. I wish I'd captured more pages of it. And then in story, it almost has this kind of like quirky, smirky weirdness of like Hellboy or maybe Umbrella Academy, but it's played really straight, even when it's being like really weird and funny. This is why I was at the bottom of my pull list. I was like, I'm not gonna read this. I don't want to go and buy another book on Comixology right now. I gotta do my hair for the show. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna read the first one. It's $2. I'm just gonna do it. And I read it and I was like, the entire time. So then I bought the second one, then I bought the third one. This is why I read everything. So I can come and tell you about weird, different books like this. Much earlier, one of you, maybe Josh, asked, is there a book that I think I'm reading that no one else on the internet is reading? It's White Lily and this. They're the last 2 things on my poll. They're the things I was going to avoid because I'd never heard of anything about them, and they were my favorite 2 books this week. So try new stuff. Okay, y'all. I'm going to take a drink of water, and while you think of questions, I'm going to run to get my computer plug, okay? So I'm only going to be away for like 10 seconds, okay? Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, oh boy, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm back. I made it. Okay. I have not read Ennis's Night, which is Ennis and I. Sometimes, this was almost my monologue instead of being about community. Sometimes you have to accept the thing is not for you, right? You can't force it to be for you. You can't you can't say that it's bad if it was never for you to begin with. Ennis is not for me. It's just that simple. I don't vibe with him. I don't really get him. I've read so many Ennis books and I'm like, really? Even like the classics, the best. And I don't need to pretend like Ennis is bad in order to say that. I can just say Ennis is not for me. So that's what I have to say about Ennis. Let me see if anybody else asked any other questions. We're kind of at time, but I have like 8 more minutes of stuff to do. Department of Truth really does live up to the hype, Nico. I mean, I think I got a little softer because I think once they got extended to a full series, they kind of did a couple of kind of inventory issues to fill out the background of the world. And I was so into the things happening in the present that I got kind of nasty. I was like, oh, fuck this. Because I wanted more of the present day story and I didn't need more world building. I was there, I was built. But it's incredibly enjoyable. Okay. People watching me at 4 a.m. Gee, wow, that's dedication. MTV, right? Max, Aeon Flux, super influential to me. All of those cartoons. Michael and I really vibe on this stuff. We must be a similar age. Okay. So, I was going to do a non-comic thing, but not comics thing. We've spent so much time, but I have it here. So, this is Marvel United. It's a board game from Come On, which is a board game studio that kickstarts stuff super regularly. And they're things they put out a lot of plastic. And so this was just the core game, but there's like boxes and boxes and boxes of additional plastic. I had ignored it at the time because I don't really love this chibi art style, so I was like, take or leave. But then they did an X-Men campaign this year, and they did like every major X-Men that you can think of, except for like 5 or 6, probably up to 2000, and even some past 2000. So I went all in on that damn campaign. So I was like, well, I should get the core box to see what it's like. It's really interesting. I think it's got one of the most flexible systems of a board game. It almost kind of reminds me of HeroClix a little, in that like everybody kind of just has their one thing they can do, and that's what they can do. So I'm just opening it up here. So the figures, the miniatures are really cool. I mean, this is very slanted towards movie Avengers. So here's Captain Marvel, really cool figure, and then here's Taskmaster. But the thing is that this box only comes with so many heroes. I already took those 2 out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 heroes and 3 villains. So there's only so many permutations you can do. And like, it doesn't have Thor because Thor has his own box. It doesn't have Spider-Man because Spider-Man has his own box. It doesn't have Black Panther because Black Panther has his own box. So that's like a little bit of a detriment, because I think if you have like a family and kids, because it's really easy to play with kids, that you have that want to play all those characters, like not all of those boxes are available at retail. And the other thing is the way that you play it, it's collaborative. You all form a storyline together by playing cards that you draw, and everybody has 12 cards, and a lot of them are just really common. Everybody's got the same kind of actions. I could do like a whole gameplay thing if this is interesting to you. But the thing is, there's no like persistent power. Like, it's just whatever you get. So like some people have special powers. So like she can move, everybody can move. She can punch, everybody can punch. Maybe she has more punches than everybody else. But then she does have one special move where she can blast an adjacent location, because she has a photon blast. That's who Captain Marvel is. It just feels like to me that if everybody had one thing they could always do, like on your turn, you can always trade and attack for a move because you're Captain Marvel. That to me would have made it so much more interesting. So what I did, because I'm a crazy person, never forget how much of a crazy person I am. I made a spreadsheet and I put on it the 1,000 most used Marvel characters, and then I made up a special move for every one of those 1,000 Marvel characters. And now when I play the game, I bring up whoever's getting used, because it's cooperative, so you can use between 2 and 4 people for however many you're playing, and I just bring up their special moves, and I made sure they wouldn't I balance tested and everything, so I am, again, a crazy person. And it's so much more fun that way, and it doesn't really affect the balance that much. It just gives you something that makes each character feels a little bit super, and it just like got super, super fun for me once it was like that. So I'm really excited for the X-Men one. I will absolutely do a haul around the world when it gets here, and if people are really excited about that, I will absolutely like publish that and do a whole series of things about it. The Marvel game's been out for like a year at this point, because it was a prior Kickstarter, so like I don't think if I did a bunch of stuff for the Marvel game, people would be excited, but people are really excited for the X-Men game. And it's got, when I say it has everybody, the only people it really skipped, it basically skipped like 1 or 2 members from each of the 80s teams. So it doesn't have Megan, but it has like everybody else from Excalibur. It doesn't have Richter or Karma, but it has pretty much everybody else from New Mutants. It really did really good coverage. So there's only missing a handful of people. So I thought I might put out like a little bumper pack of like, here's how to play the people it didn't include. So I love board gaming stuff. And I am a crazy person, and I do have the depths of craziness. Yeah, 1,000. We have to think, Nico, in my defense, I have a guide to guides that helps me build stuff for my website. And over the years, it's become a huge database to itself. So I already kind of have a guide to every major named character that's ever been featured in an issue at Marvel and DC that I work from. So it's not that crazy that I have the list. The crazy thing is I went and wrote special powers for all of them that work in the game functions. That's the crazy part. Okay, so now I'm just going to very briefly talk about next week. As you know, I do not do like a full everything coming out next week, because they did it in the first episode, and y'all were like, too much, Peter, too much. So this is just like the stuff that sticks out for me the most next week. And I try to limit myself 1 per DC, 1 per Marvel, and then 1 for 2 for everybody else, but it is just what it is, okay? So we have Crush and Lobo here. I have to say, I love Crush. I know not everybody's into her. I think she really, really worked for me on Teen Titans. The first issue by Mariko Tamaki was like perfect. I think it nailed it. But it was mostly about Crush, not about Lobo. Now, I like Lobo because I like 90s bullshit. So this is going to be the first issue that's really going to be the both of them. I'm very, very curious to see if they nail it as well. But I can't talk about DC next week without talking about The Nice House on the Lake. The first issue of this was like utter perfection. Not only storytelling from Tynion, but the lettering was amazing. The art was amazing. The coloring was amazing. It was just peak craft. But it ends with kind of the reveal of what it's all about. So that's always the danger when you get a #1 issue and it kind of ends with the, here's what the whole world is. What is the #2 going to be like? So I'm very excited for that. This just sounds cool. I need to figure out, let me make this bigger because it's way too small for you right now. zoom to fit. Ha ha! This sounds so... The first opening line of the summary for this is, Black is a werewolf who's also a private investigator. I'm like, sold. I'm going to read this comic. You didn't have to say anything else. Hui has done a lot of really cool stuff. It's one of those publishers where I checked out everything. I figured out what about their stuff I liked and what I didn't, and now I know what to pull. I always try to get the first 5 or 6 books from every new publisher just to be like, what are they about? AWA, Black Mask, Vault, all of these new publishers that pop up, Mad Cave. I always try to get their first 5 books, and then I try to figure out if they're going to keep being used. But also in indie space, I've seen so many... Why won't it keep zooming to fit? I've seen so many previews of this book, and it feels like very Dune, very Games of Thrones in space. It sounds really cool. I don't know this creative team. I just know that this cover looks really, really cool. And I'm going to read it because I read everything, usually every number 1 from Aftershock. So I'm really, really excited for this. And then this, I don't always like Peter Milligan. Sometimes he's way too slow for me, but I think we've talked about this in the show. I've been doing the show long enough that you've heard me talk about things already. I was like blown away by the first issue of this. It was just vivid, colorful. It was one of these things exploring like the line between death and life, and what if somebody can talk to people that are dead, but what if you're almost dead when you're in a coma, and what happens, all of that. Just like Ethernauts, which I loved. So I'm really excited to read number 2. And then Collections next week is not that exciting, but I have to highlight the Justice League Omnibus that's going to be out next week. This is Bronze Age. It's into the hundreds. It's like 140 something to 180 something. And this is stuff that's never been comprehensively collected. A lot of the singular issues have been collected in like the various Krisis collections that DC has done, because it's all a lot of the Justice League crossing over with their other Earth companions. But this is the first time that it's all been collected all in one place. It's a huge, huge swath that pushes us really far into the Bronze Age, and it's really exciting. So if you've been following these omnibuses, once they're gone, they're really hard to get a hold of. So if you're following them, you ought to pick it up. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of show. I think I did all the stuff I wanted to talk about, y'all. So now I have a song. So I was thinking about Community, and I was thinking about Eternals and the Eternals community, and how the Eternals are similar to X-Men in that, you know, they die but they never die, which was an Eternals thing long before it was an X-Men thing. And you know that Daddy Hickman knows that. There were rumors that Hickman was going to be writing Eternals before he took over X-Men. So maybe that was because the X-Men kind of are eternally now. So I just thought of this song, which I'm going to play. But of course, you know I have to carry the microphone across the room first because I'm really loud. So thank you so much for sticking around. This was really fun. I like doing it in this time slot. I loved answering your questions. If you didn't get to watch this live, if you comment, I will still see your questions and I can come back and answer them some other time. And I don't know that I'm going to keep doing this every week. It's a lot to prepare for, and it's a lot to read my pulls all in time for, but I like reading all my pulls in the week that they come out instead of just letting things linger. It's been really fun, but it costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time. So the best way to let me know that I should keep doing it is for you to tell me that it's worthwhile, and especially if you went out and picked up something that I told you might be cool and then it turned out to be cool and I was right and I helped you, or if you picked up something that turned out not to be cool but you want to explain that it was a good idea to try it anyway. Those are the stories that definitely can keep me in this. So I'm going to walk the microphone across the room as I do. Woo! And then I'm going to play you a song. Okay. Microphone, because I'm really loud. Especially this song. It's gonna get loud. Okay. So this is a song. It's actually not one of my songs with my band. It's a song that I've always played solo, and I wanted to play with the band, but we actually, I moved on to other stuff, and I moved to New Zealand before the band ever got to it. But it's one of my favorites. It's called Regenerate. I'm trying to fit me on it. Okay, here we go. Okay. I haven't played it for a while because I'm not like gigging here, so I'm not going to be able to respond to your chats. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. Until I do, be well, and this is Regenerate. Okay. In a room full of strangers that were once close to me, I wonder if I'm running from intimacy, or just pushing away all the ones who got to know me so well that they can no longer tell what I really believe in. Did I lie, or are my cells just changing? I know I said that I would stick around. In 7 years our bodies rearrange, regenerate. common ground. Did I lie or all my cells just changing? I know it said that I would stick around. In 7 years the body's rearranged, regenerate the common ground. The first impressions are the ones that last. What happens when we stop reflecting our past? I won't live in the shadow of us that was. In the shadows we cast, I won't spend my life looking back. Did I lie or are my cells just changing? I know I said that I would stick around. In 7 years our bodies rearrange, regenerate the common ground. Did I lie or are my cells just changing? I know it said that I would stick around. In 7 years our bodies rearrange, regenerate the common ground. If silence is violence, you gain no traction. Backslide to denial, defend your inaction. It hardly matters cause my mind is made up. It's been that way for longer than you know. Did I lie or are my cells just changing? I know I said that I would stick around. In 7 years our bodies rearrange, regenerate the common ground. I never lie but my cells do change. You thought you knew me but you don't at all. I try but I can't love you the same as I did before. Sorry, I'm sorry, I said I love you but my cells they change. You're not the person I used to belong to. You used to know what went on in my head, now you think you know. But you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I've already moved on. That's Regenerate. I'm Krisis with a K. This has been Crushing Comics Live. Thanks so much for being a part of it. I look forward to seeing you again on the channel sometime soon.